welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are talking about dehydrators and dehydrating fruit and vegetables. Many of you have been commenting and you were saying that you really wanted to start dehydrating this year, but you really wasn't sure where to start and how complicated it is. And it's totally, guys, it honestly couldn't be any more better time to start dehydrating and preparing. With anything going on right now and the shortages and things that are basically forecasted for this year, honestly, it couldn't be a better time. So as it comes to dehydrator, as I mentioned before, I had my Andrew James dehydrator for about 10 years. My husband bought it me first when we started growing vegetables, and it's about 10 or 11 years old, and is making the first and the last appearance in the video because unfortunately this poor sod had it. I think he paid around £45 for it about 10 years ago, and this guy worked really hard, but now it's come time that now the timer thing doesn't work, the power thing doesn't always work, and the temperature sometimes regulates time, and the things are now started snapping in pieces now. So I'm really sorry to see, unfortunately, to see him go, but I'll have to now buy a new dehydrator. So I might have to hold off on the buying some preps, because the next one I want is obviously on my list to go. So one thing, guys, if I can please ask you, if you can watch the adverts, if it's not too much hassle, that will help me out a lot, because I found the dehydrator that I want, but it's currently on the deal on Amazon, so I kind of want to get it out as soon as possible. But anyway, so the moral of the story, guys, with a dehydrator, you don't have to go and basically spend a fortune. The first thing is to get yourself started. A very basic dehydrator are absolutely fine. You can, as I said, you can pick them up for about £50-60 now, but as experience, I would say probably stay away with the ones that have the plastic little trays, because although yes, it's a 10 years old, guys, I can't, to be fair, can't grumble for the price, but if you want something that potentially lasts you a lifetime, I think probably will consider going with the one that's got a metal shelf. But I am ever so grateful for knowing this chap, and I will truly miss him. Anyway, so we're moving on, guys. So about dehydrating, okay, so you can pretty much dehydrate any fruit or vegetables you want, and it's literally really simple. There's of course some things that you can do, or things you probably wouldn't want to do anyway, but as the logic prevails, you can dehydrate majority of the fruits and vegetables. Question you might ask, would the dehydrating vegetables preserve all the good nutrients and vitamins? Absolutely. Dehydrating fruit and vegetables preserves majority of your nutritious value in whatever you're dehydrating, because you basically not cooking it, but you kind of cooking it low and slow. It basically keeps all the nutrients in there. The other question is, do those things taste as good as they are fresh? They don't taste the same, and the texture is not the same. However, guys, don't forget the reason you're dehydrating for is for long-term storage. So things like the mushrooms, they come out really good. Like leeks, they come out really good as well. So everything that you will then rehydrate will have a different texture and different flavor, though flavor will be more concentrated sometimes than you would do in a normal fresh fruit and vegetables. And basically we're going on to, sorry, I'm going to follow my little list. So basically the rules are, or the questions are, so it takes as long as you'll take to dry your vegetables. There are guidelines online or in the book. If you have a dehydrator, it will tell you that roughly will take, say, 6 to 10 or 6 to 8 hours to, say, dehydrate a lemon. Of course, 6 to 8 hours is quite a big gap in between, but again, it all depends on the size of your lemon, how thick you cut your lemon, and basically on your dehydrator. So it's kind of like how long a piece of string. So the moral of the story, guys, it's ready when it's ready. So on average, yes, everything will take between 8 and sometimes it could take up to 24 hours. It literally does depend on what are you drying, but it's ready when it's ready. You cannot hurry this along by turning up the temperature, because that basically just means you're gonna cook your product and potentially lose the nutritional value by basically speeding it up. So be patient, follow the selected and guided guidelines of the temperatures you need for certain stuff, and just wait for it to happen. And when you know the item is done, it's basically when the things are crispy and ready to go. So ready to go? Yeah, crispy and ready, basically they snap. One of the things, say for example, with the oranges, they're the true representation of when the sugar caramelizes, the oranges go a bit darker color. And basically, I think I've got oxygen absorber in that one. Or maybe I don't. No, I don't think I do. So they become darker. And again, you can see that hopefully it's gone a little bit browner. It's due to basically the sugar caramelizing inside. I have been dehydrating them on 70 degrees, but to be fair, I can probably do this at 50 and they will retain slightly more of a yellow color, but that will take an extra long amount of time. So I'm choosing to do this at the 70. And the same as guys with the oranges, they take probably about 10 hours. Again, they have to be cut really thinly, but you want to be able to snap this and no issues whatsoever. You might ask why you bother dehydrating like oranges and lemon. Well, first of all, I make my own tea infusions, which I'll share with you on other video. And secondly, I make a lemon crumb, which I use basically in creating my own seasoning for like chicken and fish. Basically, you dry this to the point when it's totally dry, and then you grind it, and then you mix salt, pepper, and other ingredients and other herbs and spices that you want, and basically create a nice little rub for your meat or fish. And of course, when you just put hot water in the lemon, you can add it to the tea, and it will kind of basically give you the same effect as a lemon does if you just put a fresh lemon. So those things are really, really good. All right, so basically the next step is, guys, after you dehydrated your fruits or vegetables, before you put those in your jar, you have to make sure they'll sit there and basically just be totally cool. To be fair, I normally set my dehydrator first thing in the morning, and I let it sit there, and I turn it off in the evening, and then I let it sit basically switched off overnight, so it's totally cool, and then I basically put it in the jar. Right, next thing, don't forget you have to condition the jar. Is basically after you put your fruit and veg in the jar, you have to leave this and keep an eye on the jar, right? Keep an eye and make sure every day you check and make sure the things don't stick together or there is no condensation appearing like on the inside of the lid of the jar, because any tiny bit of moisture that's left in there will basically spoil your whole batch. So keep an eye on it. I normally have a look at it for like 3-4 days. Keep an eye. If nothing's stuck together, then it goes in my cupboard long term, if I'm putting it for long term with the oxygen absorber. Or if you got a little bit of moisture, then you have to put it back in the dehydrator, because guys, skipping this step could cost you a big time. If you imagine, for example, that liter, is it 2 liter jar of lemons, that's a good few. I think there was, oh my god, I think call it like 3 kilos of lemons. So you can imagine the cost if you skip that step and the stuff gets ruined. There's a lot of time and a lot of money wasted, so it's very important, okay? So make sure you condition it, make sure it doesn't stick before you put this away. Right, next thing, never dehydrate smelly things like smelly vegetables with fruit or even other vegetables. The worst culprit I found is basically onions, mushrooms, and leeks, and also well, actually anything the vegetable wise is actually got quite a strong smell, but leeks I would think is probably one of the worst. It's a nice smell, but it will stink out the whole house, and it will stink anything that you put with it. So it might be not an issue to you. It's absolutely fine if you want to. If you only got a little bit of leeks, a little bit of mushrooms, you can dehydrate them together. Guys, it's not a big deal, but just be aware that if you put something that you don't want to soak in, something that's smelly, do not put them together. Certainly do not put any fruit with any of your vegetables or mushrooms, because it's just going to ruin the whole thing, okay? Right, so another thing on my list is for you to understand that some things will shrink more than others. You can see lemons and oranges, that look pretty okay. The strawberries, if you can see, they've been cut on the small little things. They've not done too bad. Carrots are not too bad neither. I normally dehydrate my carrots by using a speed peeler rather than cutting them on, and that works best for me because they're thin, they dehydrate quicker, and they rehydrate quicker. Right? Leeks not doing too bad neither. You can see kiwis, they dehydrated pretty good. I've got them here with the oxygen absorber. They are so tasty, guys, and they've got so many benefits, but I'll cover this on a different video. But the worst culprit I found, guys, is peppers. Peppers seem to dehydrate and they just become nothing. This was like, I think there was like 2 or 3 packets, and I've cut them up on the quite thin chunks, but I know they contain a lot of water, but they shriveled up. I'm like, oh, is that all I'm getting? So just be mindful that although you might pick up a couple of two vegetables, that understand that you might not yield yourself a lot if you just pick enough few things, because they shrink up so much. And another issue I found is that with the dehydrator like this, with the quite big slots, that that the small things are fall through and end up going on the bottom. So it's kind of one of those things. But yes, be mindful and understand you might not get as much as you want. And the same kind of applicable to when you dry like spinach. This is spinach, and this was 2 kilos of spinach. And this has kind of been packed in lightly. I haven't even sort of squashed it in there. So you can see, to be fair, if I'm to add it on, I would need to use quite a good few tablespoons. So again, just you'll understand, you'll learn with the experience that how much you need, because yeah, that's what happens. Okay, other thing I've got, oh yes, I did say already about the change in the color because of the obviously content of the sugar in the products. So with the green things, if you dehydrate green vegetables, for example, I've got here a green broccoli. It works really well and rehydrates really well. Adding them onto I normally add it onto the pasta if I'm doing like a broccoli pesto pasta with a bit of peas. It works really well. But you've got to blanch the product first for it to keep the color. The same is with the carrots. You've got to literally submerge it in simmering water for a minute or so. It will preserve your color. It will stop your color basically disappearing, because if you don't do this with the carrots, they go like a brownie and horrible color, and the broccoli will go just not particularly nice color neither. So although you will still have edible product, but you'll preserve more nutritious value when you basically blanch the products, those ones specifically, and then dehydrate them. Okay, and another thing I was going to say, guys, is the results are far better than a short board. I've mentioned this in one of my videos before. I've dehydrated my own herbs. I've got a big herb bed, and I dehydrate rosemary, basil, coriander, and they taste, it's day and night between excuse me, the stuff that you buy in the shop and it is your own. The same thing again, I've done a dehydrated ginger excuse me, I've dehydrated some ginger again for my tea infusions in the tiny little slivers, and I've done a whole lot when I dehydrated the ginger and then ground it into the powder. I've compared again the short board powder that I used to get and the ginger, like a fresh made ginger powder. Again, it literally, you just can't compare. You can't compare. Not as obviously saying this, you know exactly that you made it, how you made it, you know your hygiene standards, and you know exactly where your food comes from. Right. Okay, so that kind of covers this area of that. So next thing we are talking about last thing is basically storing your vegetables or fruit, in fact. This stuff here, majority of the things are used for imminent or kind of like a medium time use, apart from things like kiwis, because I put the oxygen absorber in there, so I can't be opening the jar all the time, so it will stay there and it stays in the back of my cupboard for SHGF kind of situation, because they're really high in vitamin C and other vitamins as well. Stuff that you use on the regular basis, they're fine to go in the glass jars just with a little clip top lid, or in a normal jar with a normal lid. That's absolutely fine. If you want to keep the stuff longer, guys, I strongly suggest, and I will be doing that myself, because I've bought one of those attachments. You can seal one of those mason jars. I haven't done this yet, but rather than wasting oxygen absorbers, because they are quite expensive, you can just vacuum seal the lid to the top, like you would do with when you do the like hot water canning or whatever, but you just do this with a vacuum sealer with the attachment, and it basically just vacuums that. And generally your herbs and all your fruit and veg will last, providing, guys, you keep them in the cool and dark storage for up to 5 years, if not longer. You can basically put them in the vacuum bag. That's absolutely fine. Just don't forget, when you vacuum stuff like fragile stuff like spinach, if you put that in a vacuum bag, you'll literally end up with a spinach powder, because the vacuum will basically crush the leaves. So another thing is I'm saying actually crushing and becoming a powder. You can make powders. So if you're not sure, it's like, well, I'm going to do with the spinach, how you're going to cook it. Well, you can add on to the things, of course, when you cook into the soups or the stews, Or you can make it into the powder and then you can add it on to, say, shakes, or add it onto soups and stews, or sneak it into your kids' diet somehow. You can do this with many things, just because you can. So if you're unsure, but again, the same thing, guys, one of the main points as well, only kind of dehydrate the stuff you're going to eat or your family's going to eat. It's pointless me dehydrating kale, because, well, if I don't eat kale, then if I don't eat it fresh, I'm certainly not going to eat it dry. So just by following, because other people do this and they have a whole array of dehydrated products, it is pointless, right? It's like with anything, like prepping anything that you don't want or you don't eat, it's absolutely pointless. You can spend all the time and resources doing it, but in the end of even the SHTF situation, if you can't stomach the bleeding kale fresh and you can't stomach it dry, then you just won't eat it. There is no point. So pick exactly what you want to dehydrate, pick what you like eating or you can do something with, and then dehydrate that. Don't forget, guys, like obviously vegetables, self-explanatory, add them onto cooking, but with the fresh fruit, for example, I've got some apples. I dehydrated some apples for my little girl with a little bit of honey, dehydrate them for, it did take a little while, that's why I've done the small batch, but rather than her eating crisps, she quite enjoys eating apples. They're not particularly overly crunchy, but that's another thing, that not everything will become the same consistency when it's dry. Some things like apples or pears or tomatoes will never be bone dry. They're always going to have some sort of moisture retaining in. So those kind of things, guys, you cannot put in a vacuum, because anything that's more than 10% moisture, you vacuum up and you basically risking of having a bacteria growing in there. But yes, so apples, great for her for have a snack. At the same time, like strawberries, again, apples, kiwis could be added on to porridge. So if you're trying to, again, sneak in some extra vitamins for yourself or for your children, for whoever, having a dried fruit is a good way to go. If you ever bought any of the cereals, from the shops, and they have fruits in them, there's barely any fruit in there. But it's nice to have. If you enjoy having this, having some extra to hand is really good, especially for the SHTF situation. And basically, yeah, guys, I think that's pretty much covered it. One last thing, guys, I did say this in the beginning. Very expensive things, the dehydrators, you don't have to basically spend the money if you don't have the money or if you don't want to spend the money. If you just wanted to start out, then the cheap things do just as good of a job. You just got extra bits you kind of have to deal with, like I said earlier, but it's generally they do a good of a job. So if you are on the market and you're wanting to start dehydrating, as I mentioned, guys, it's a good time to start now. I think, like we mentioned before, with many things, the prices are going up anyway. And we notice this with the jars, we've noticed with many other preserving things, the prices are going up because people now are a little bit more panicky, like because, we haven't had tomatoes, we're having shortages or other shortages that are due. People be like, let's start growing, let's start preserving. So if you want to start doing this now, then it's no better time than doing this right now. Anyway, well, I'm going to stop talking now. Hopefully I've covered majority. If you do have any questions, guys, please comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already, and please watch some adverts to help me get my dehydrator a bit quicker. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.